Hello, good day everyone. Welcome to Parasitology Part 4. Living as a parasite within or upon another organism offers numerous advantages, but it also poses two fundamental problems. The first is that all life is mortal, and therefore either the parasite and its progeny have to be able to move between the host in order to ensure the survival of subsequent generations. Assuming that a means of transfer is available, the second major problem is identifying a suitable host. In particular, those parasites that live within the body of their host usually only have one chance once they are committed to the invasion process. This means that they must be able to identify a potential host with a high degree of certainty, otherwise the consequences would be fatal to the parasite. Well, the figure shows an example of a contaminative transmission. This often occurs when a parasitic infection is acquired through consumption of either food or water that is contaminated with the infective stage. It can also occur through the infective stage being breathed in or otherwise accidentally ingested. Contaminative transmission is therefore an essentially passive process in which parasite and host meet through chance, and therefore its success is heavily influenced by the abundance of the infective stage or stages of the parasite. Sometimes contamination can occur in the most unexpected ways. For example, in 2007, there was an outbreak of Chagas disease among children attending a school in Venezuela who had consumed guava juice containing the met- uh, metacyclic trypanosomes of Trypanosoma cruzi. Sexual intercourse between animals is an exceptionally dangerous activity for all sorts of reasons. For example, during intercourse, the participants become vulnerable to attack because they focus upon one another rather than their surroundings, and their ability to move and defend themselves is limited. Consequently, the physical act is usually extremely brief. Sexual intercourse also presents an ideal opportunity for disease transmission because two hosts are in close physical contact. Furthermore, intermittent sex and the exchange of body fluids mean that endoparasitic and intracellular species can be transmitted without being exposed to the environment. Gametes are unicellular structures, and therefore only intracellular parasites can be transmitted within them. The majority of male gametes, especially in mammals, are very small and contain little cytoplasm, which limits the space available for any parasite. Indeed, the evolution of small male gamete size may be driven by the host attempt to control the transmission of parasites within them. There are, of course, exceptions. For example, the males of some species of the fruit fly Drosophila produce sperm that are over uh, 10 times their own body length. Another major factor preventing organisms from parasitizing spermatozoa is that sperm competition is intense, so anything that compromises their movement would reduce their chances of fertilizing the egg and thus passing on the disease to offspring. It is therefore not surprising that there are relatively few records of spermatozoa being parasitized, and this is usually with viruses or rickettsia-like organisms. Congenital transmission is an example of vertical transmission. This refers to the transmission that occurs through infection of the developing egg or embryo while it is still within its mother's body or at the time of birth or egg laying. In invertebrates, it is often referred to as transovarial transmission, and in mammals, the infection is either acquired across the placenta, that's why it's called transplacental transmission, or through passage through the birth canal or contact with the mother around the time of the birth, or sometimes called as the perinatal transmission. The end result is the same in that the young are born or hatch already infected with the parasite. Autoinfection occurs when a parasite produces infective stages that colonize the same individual host as their parents. Because the offspring remain within or upon their host, they do not have to overcome all the biological and environmental factors that normally reduce the chances of transmission. However, parasites often induce an immune reaction in their host that prevents or limits the ability of other parasites of the same species from establishing them. Nosocomial infections are those that are acquired in hospitals or as a result of medical procedure. Hospitals can be unhealthy places as they contain lots of sick people within a very confined space. It is therefore not unusual for patients to acquire an infectious disease while being treated for a different condition. The dangers posed by hospital-acquired bacterial and viral infections are well known, but some parasites can also cause problems. For example, unless hygiene is rigorously enforced, there is the potential for the contaminative transmission of a range of parasitic diseases, particularly gastrointestinal parasites. The hosts and vectors. Paratenic hosts are not usually essential for the transmission of a parasite, but they do improve the chances of it taking place. For example, the larvae of some Ancylostoma species. Sometimes they invade rodents but are unable to complete their development. The invading larvae enter arrested development within the tissues of the rodent and are able to infect a dog or cat should it consume the infected rodent. The transmission cycle can theoretically become even more complicated since the infectious third stage larvae are capable of surviving for a prolonged time on insects, and a rodent can become infected if it consumes an infected insect. Many parasites have complex life cycles involving two or more species of hosts within which different developmental stages occur. The intermediate hosts are those within um, which some of a parasite's immature stages occur. The intermediate host is therefore essential, since without it, the parasite would be unable to complete its life cycle. The absence of a suitable intermediate host can therefore prevent a parasite from extending its geographical range, and thus the targeting of the intermediate host may prove to be the most effective control strategy. Being parasitized can harm the host health and thereby increase the chances of it being captured and consumed. For example, the host may become weak and therefore less able to detect or avoid a predator. This is a byproduct of being parasitized and cannot be considered a specific adaptation on the part of the pathogen to increasing the chance of uh, transmission. However, parasites sometimes do induce a chances in the morphology, physiology, or behavior of their host that appear to have evolved specifically to enhance the chances of transmission taking place, but it is not always easy to distinguish instances of this. For example, the Cenorus or the bladder worm of the tapeworm Tinea multiceps causes condition that is colloquially known as GID, in which infected sheep exhibit a characteristic high stepping gait and walk around in circles. Such sheep would be easy for dogs, the tapeworm's final host, to catch. GID results from the parasite invading the brain and forming a large fluid-filled cenorus that causes pressure, atrophy, and localized blockage of the blood supply, thereby bringing about the death of brain cells. Parasites are normally considered unwelcome guests whose presence is almost invariably harmful. Although, as we have seen in the past discussions, defining and measuring harm can prove problematic. It can still appear perverse to consider the possibility that parasites might have their uses. Since the 1960s and 1970s, there has been a rapid rise in the incidence of a wide range of allergic and autoimmune inflammatory conditions. in industrialized countries like the type 1 diabetes. For example, about 20% of children in industrialized countries currently suffer from asthma, allergic rhinitis, or eczema. There is indication that the high incidence of these conditions will continue to increase for many years yet to come. The reasons for these increases are not fully understood but are undoubtedly influenced by a wide variety of both genetic and environmental factors. However, one in particular, parasitic disease, is now thought to have a major role. The hygiene hypothesis, as it is come to be called, was initially invoked to explain why children in the UK brought up in large families tend to suffer less from eczema and hay fever. It was suggested that in small family units there is less opportunity for transmission of infectious organisms. Furthermore, in developed countries, since the Second World War, transmission of infectious diseases has been reduced by improved sanitation, better standards of living, and the widespread use of antibiotics. As a consequence, in developed countries, children no longer receive the levels of immunological challenge from infectious organisms that used to be commonplace. The hygiene hypothesis proposes that when the body's immune system is no longer challenged by infectious organisms on a regular basis, it is more likely to become activated by inappropriate stimuli, and therefore there is an increased susceptibility to allergies and autoimmune inflammatory diseases. And this one is an example of a useful parasite in fishes, and this you can actually observe when you are cooking a fish. This is a Cymothoa exigua. This parasite attaches its body to the host, which is the fish, specifically in the tongue of the fish. Eventually, the um, Cymothoa exigua will replace the tongue of the fish. The parasite treatment and control. There is a wide variety of parasites and an equally wide range of substances and practices used in their treatment and control. We have therefore not attempted to list and compare individual classes of drugs and their modes of action or to go into great depth on the different approaches to control programs. Attempting to understand parasite life cycles is like learning the mother tongue. It is complicated and full of obscure exceptions to the rule. However, without the grammar of mother tongue, one cannot speak the Bisaya or the mother tongue correctly, and without knowledge of a parasite's life cycle, one cannot begin to understand how it is transmitted and how it causes disease. Consequently, if one knows the life cycle, one can begin to work out many aspects relevant to treatment and control. So here is a table on how a parasite's life cycle can influence its treatment and control. The properties required in an antiparasitic drug are in many respects no different from those looked for in most other pharmaceutical products. So here, this table shows the properties of an ideal antiparasitic drug or treatment regime. This may be used for effective treatment of the parasite. I hope you learned something in all the discussions. See you and stay safe. Bye.